Welcome to the Mr. Beacon podcast. This week is pretty special. We've got one of the most consequential computer companies in the world, IBM, that we're going to be featuring, and their program director for supply chain intelligence, Wiggs Civitillo. He is a great guy, and he has an amazing portfolio of products that he manages. And so that's what we're going to drill into. It's important stuff. We are focused on IoT on this podcast, but IoT is really infrastructure. It's the applications that make it useful. And so this application layer that IBM provide is the thing that gives visibility to supply chains. And that visibility is going to drive massive, explosive growth of IoT technologies. So we're going to talk about the applications for it, how it works, what IBM's doing. And for those of you who, obviously everyone knows IBM, but you want to be able to talk about it intelligently, then Wiggs is going to give us an update on their latest, as well as some of the history. So interesting stuff. Enjoy it. So, Wiggs, welcome to the Mr. Beacon Ambient IoT podcast. It is a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
We've got a lot to talk about. Second half of the show, we're going to talk a bit about IBM. This show is all about kind of, me learning. That's actually the kind of the secret reason for the show, but also equipping our listeners and viewers with what they need to be successful in designing solutions. And I think IBM is an incredibly significant company. And later on, we'll go into some of the history and how that's evolved since the 2000s when I worked there. But we're going to get a chance to talk to you about your the area that you're responsible for, and get into crypto, into the supply chain, into the applications that IBM has that are really at the heart of some of the biggest companies in the world and the way they manage their supply chains. And you've recently made an announcement on a partnership with iFoodDS. So I want to talk about that. But I mean, the reason why I think this area is important is, we're focused on Internet of Things, IoT, and a rebirth of IoT that will deliver on the original vision and scale beyond the few tens of billions to trillions. And it's really the things that are in the supply chain, especially the food, where we can have huge benefits if we connect it to the power of the cloud, which IBM knows all about. And apply the intelligence there to reduce waste, to manage down carbon footprint, and to unlock huge economies and profits and new business models. But at the center of this, you need some infrastructure. And as I've been thinking and working on ambient IoT, one of the bits that I'm really been concerned about, to be frank, is how do you join up suppliers, distributors, retailers, and how do you pass all of this information up and down the supply chain, especially, these new sensing dimensions that we have. And I think, one of the products that's in your product portfolio as a product manager includes the GS1 EPCIS standards that can be used to go beyond the kind of the very crude, this pallet's arriving, to the details of exactly where things are in the supply chain at a much more granular level, and the condition that they're in, the temperature that they're in, and even in the future, the carbon that's being accumulated at every step. And it's all very well having sensors that can measure that, which is what I focus on in my day job. But how do we pass that data around? And I think IBM is of a stature and has some of the tools to do that. So welcome to the show. Want to get into it. maybe you can describe a bit about your role at IBM and give an overview of the products that you're responsible for.
Yes, certainly. And thanks again. This is such a wonderful opportunity to share my story, share the IBM Food Trust story. So I'm a product manager at IBM. I'm a leader of a few different products, but one of my favorites and one that I've spent most of my time at IBM with is IBM Food Trust. It's a very dynamic role within product management. Working very closely with our development teams, our customers, our partners, to define the platform's features and capabilities. And I've been doing that for the past 4 or 5 years. Really just continuously trying to evolve the product to meet the needs of the food industry and make sure that we're facilitating the best experiences possible. Now, the story of IBM Food Trust is a bit of a fascinating one, and I'd love to share a little bit about it if that's okay. Really rooted in the need for increased transparency and increased food safety in the global food supply chain. So it all began with a series of very high-profile food safety incidents that really shook consumer confidence. So we saw cases of E. coli outbreaks, we saw salmonella contamination, and even counterfeit products to some degree, right? I did some research and I learned that the odds of me, if I order a red snapper in New York City at a restaurant, there's only really a 50 or so % chance that I'm actually getting red snapper on the plate, because there's another fish that might be 1/4 of the cost that I could be served, and I wouldn't know any better, right? And I really wouldn't. I don't have that discerning taste. So IBM recognized very early on that blockchain technology had the potential to really revolutionize the way that we manage the food supply chain. Concept was very simple, but groundbreaking. We're going to create a digital ledger that records every step of the journey of a food product from farm to table. The ledger, built on blockchain, specifically Hyperledger Fabric, would be tamper-proof and immutable and accessible to all authorized participants, right? That's a key piece, and we can dig into more later. But the key tenet of the platform is that every company owns their data and controls the privacy and how they want to share their data. And that's very important. And so this system was designed to provide a unchangeable record of all the product's history and promoting transparency and trust. Now, in order to do that, you need to adhere to different standards, and we can talk about EPCIS in a moment. But IBM Food Trust was initially launched as a pilot project with a number of major food industry players. We're talking about Walmart, Nestle, Tyson Foods, right, and all participating in uploading their data, sharing their data, and helping build this network of supply chain participants that can seamlessly share their data. Today, we've become a global platform with a network of hundreds of suppliers, retailers, and consumers all working together to ensure the integrity and safety of the food that's being produced and consumed. So the driving force really behind what we're trying to create is a shared vision of building a safer, smarter, more transparent, and efficient supply chain ecosystem for everyone. And that's really evolved into a tool for the industry, providing consumers with the story of their products, right? Consumers, they love seeing the story of their products, but they don't want a generic marketing story of here's how your coffee may have been treated. They want to know, how did my actual cup of coffee come to be? Where was the farm where it was harvested? And tell me about my specific product. And this really makes a difference in building trust. That's why we called it IBM Food Trust. And that's a really key tenet of what we've built.
And if I can just butt in, I think it is really important. And I think there's 2 dimensions to it. One is about food merchandising, but the other one is actually a chance to make really meaningful change in where food comes from. So, there's a local, I go to all sorts of places. I actually buy stuff at Walmart, but I also go to a local store called Jimbo's. It's organic, and everything costs roughly 60% more than what you'd pay elsewhere. But I pay that because they have these little signs that tell me where the food came from and how far away it's traveled. And that is, I think, an incredible opportunity. We can scale that experience, and the and the trust and the enjoyment it gives me. I feel good about the food that I'm eating when I know where it came from, because as anyone that watched that Netflix documentary Poisoned knows, if your food comes from a farm that's next to some source of pollution, even though it's organic, and there's slurry running from a densely packed cattle shed, then it can be dangerous. So I think there's definitely money to be made, and there's joy to be had from giving consumers visibility on exactly what they're eating and where it came from. It's not just window dressing. It can be a core part of the business model. But the thing that really gets me passionate is, and I got this from a conversation I had with an amazing climate scientist who I've mentioned before on the podcast, Mike Berners-Lee, younger brother of Tim Berners-Lee, the guy that invented the web and HTML and HTTP. So Mike is as brilliant as his brother, but he's focused on climate. And the thing that he's passionate about is consumers voting with their purses and wallets to buy food that is good for the planet, to buy food that either has a low carbon footprint or maybe even a negative carbon footprint if it was grown from a regenerative farm. But how are we going to find this out at scale? And that's why I think what you're describing is actually very important. I think it's also a big business opportunity. So I had to get that in, but I didn't want to interrupt your flow. I do have some questions though about how it works. So I have to confess, I came to IBM Food Trust with a huge amount of skepticism. I kind of had envisaged these massive blockchain mining farms creating very wasteful data structures that weren't really required. And can you help disabuse me of that prejudice?
I would be happy to. Yes, and it's a common challenge that we've faced. Being in the blockchain space, many minds tend to naturally gravitate towards crypto, to open permissionless ledgers like Ethereum, like Bitcoin. And it's important to acknowledge that there are other types of blockchains. There are different categories of blockchains. Specifically, Hyperledger Fabric is very focused on supporting the concept of a private permissioned ledger, right? The idea of not having mining operations, only having trusted parties handling those nodes, which we call trust anchors. And that really changes the dynamic of the system. Talking about, IBM's, executive level, high level strategy, sustainability is a very core tenet to what we're trying to do. We've actually recently renamed our entire software division that I'm a part of to IBM Sustainability Software. And that's, not just a message to the market of our investment in this space, but it's taking every product that we have and figure out how we can drive sustainable goals. So when we think about food traceability, we're feeding into a reduction in food waste, right? Building more consumer trust and confidence. And even when we look at this on a macro scale, and what you were just saying about consumers voting with their wallets on better quality food and treating the farms and all the participants in the supply chain better, there's a version of that has us eating food that's so much better, so much nutrient rich and healthy. And I was talking with one of your colleagues about this, that we actually reduce healthcare costs, right? We actually give people healthier lives. We improve the health of people on a macro scale, and that's a beautiful vision. I know we're getting a little off track on this, but I really think it's something that I would love to see come to fruition.
Yeah, that's Anthony Yousefian, who's our VP of climate and circularity, and he spent a bunch of time in agri-tech and as well as climate. So, but back to IBM and Food Trust. So how does Food Trust work today? Let's say I am a supplier and I am selling to one of the biggest grocery chains in the world, who happens to use IBM Food Trust. How do I see it and what does it do?
Yeah. So I'll start at the high level and we'll go a little bit deeper. We won't go too deep, but from a seller's perspective, from any participant's perspective, it's very easy to get data onto the platform, right? You don't need to know anything about blockchain. You don't need to, study the GS1 standard or even understand what EPCIS events are, right? All you need to do is ensure that you're collecting the right data, and that collection can happen via simple web forms, right? Pull up your tablet, pull up your computer, and just enter data in while you're on the manufacturing line, while you're on the farm, right? Pull out your phone and enter that you've just harvested a product, right? And the date, the time, and what product you've harvested, and what your identification code is. Or you could do it in a programmatic way, right? You could integrate with our APIs and feed data from your ERP systems, from other systems that might collect this data. Now, it's important to acknowledge that many ERP systems today don't collect all of the data necessary for traceability, right? Traceability is much different than the financial focus of many ERP systems. If we think about the origins of SAP, that was built originally as an accounting system. It's not designed to tell the story of the product. So when we're telling the story, you really need to break down what each participant does in the supply chain. So if I'm a farm, I'm harvesting and I'm shipping. And then once I ship, someone's receiving it, right? It could be a broker, a distributor, a processor, right? Or a cooler, right? Whoever it is receives that product, they do something to it, then they ship it, right? Step by step until it gets all the way to the consumer, right? And it's consumed. Now, there could be complex transformation events that are many to one, right? You take all the ingredients, you've got feta cheese, cucumbers, carrots, and romaine lettuce into a Greek salad, right? That's a transformation that needs to be tracked across different identifiers. And then that salad could be divided into portions, or it could be, allocated in different ways. And so the idea of traceability does tell the story of the product, but it requires additional information to be captured so that each link can be made in the supply chain. So at the underlying level, the IBM Food Trust platform is leveraging blockchain technology. And more specifically, it's built on Hyperledger Fabric. This is getting back a little bit to your original question of kind of this mega kind of mining operation. Mm-hmm. Hyperledger Fabric, as a bit of background, is an open source Linux Foundation maintained framework that was developed. IBM had huge contributions to this framework, but it is open source and publicly owned, and many different contributors around the world under the Hyperledger project, right? So it's designed to offer privacy, scalability, and security, making it an ideal choice for food supply chains, mm-hmm. right? And specifically, privacy is paramount. Your data is your own data. If we take a supplier, they don't want two different retailers that they serve to see what they're shipping to another retailer, because you could find yourself in a very dangerous anti-competitive situation where you may lose business with one, or be doing business with one at the expense of the other. So the way that our system is designed is that the data that you upload, you control how you share it. Now, we have default entitlements that allow end-to-end traceability, and the way that works is at the actual lot level, at the individual unit, right? If it's a crate of tomatoes or a crate of lettuce, if you ship 10 crates to one retailer and 20 crates to another, those retailers can only see data for the products that they touch and the products that they receive. And that's really, really important. Now, it's a little bit complex to do that, but the key part about how data is shared is that it's handled in a trusted way. And this is where some of the blockchain aspects come into play. And specifically, we think about smart contracts, right? Smart contracts is a concept of enforcing an agreement of how data is handled once it's on the platform. So if I register an event that a product has been delivered to my warehouse, then I should automatically issue payment, right? And even better, if we have IoT sensors, right, tracking a product, and they can register that a product's been received, there's no need for any human intervention. We know exactly where the product is. We know that the contract of delivering the product on time and in full has been delivered, and you can issue payment. The potential to reduce disputes in the industry is huge, and disputes are not insignificant in this industry, right? It's a commonality of doing business is that you need to deal with disputes. Shipments do arrive late, right? This stuff happens, right? And there are all sorts of complexities in how products are handled. But underlying this smart contract context is also rules about how we handle data sharing. IBM can't change those rules, right? They are encoded on the ledger, right? They're all secure. And that adds a layer of trust about how we're handling your data. You can see exactly what our governance structure is for how we handle data, and you can know that your data is being handled in a trusted way. There's no risk of IBM coming in and just changing everything on you. It's consistent and it's trusted, which makes a big difference to a lot of enterprise-grade companies.
Well, I have a question about this visibility, basically how much you can see and how much you can restrict. I mean, in my ideal world, then I'm going to the store and I'm seeing exactly the farm where the product came from, when it was harvested, and how long it took to get to me. And oh, by the way, I'd also like to see the carbon footprint so I can use my resources to vote for low carbon food. Is that end-to-end visibility something that you can facilitate?
Absolutely. And that really is the end goal, right? Some companies may not want that, and that's perfectly fine, right? In the context of the Food Safety Modernization Act, right, the FDA legislation that's just gone into effect, companies need to have traceability data, and there is a mandate out there for many categories of food, but it doesn't require end-to-end traceability. What end-to-end traceability facilitates is not only a story for consumers, but faster and more precise recalls. And that story to consumers has been proven to have a positive effect on consumption habits, on price, price marks, right? Willingness to pay for a higher price. So the end-to-end visibility is absolutely feasible, and that's something that we've facilitated for many different supply chains for many different categories.
Is anyone doing it yet? Or because my sense of the status quo is that, generally speaking, the people up and down the supply chain don't really want to share the data today. And I'm hoping that there'll be good reasons that make sense to their business to do it. But am I right in saying that generally end-to-end visibility, you could facilitate it, but the market has not spoken to the point that you can actually see it today?
Emphatically, yes. It's been done in many, many different categories. Now, I will caveat to say some categories may not find it as valuable. You need to make sure that it's category specific. It's a product that really does benefit from traceability. In some cases, if recalls are less frequent and consumers aren't as passionate about seeing the story, it may not make sense. It may not have a business justification to actually go with traceability. But even in those cases, that end-to-end traceability provides visibility about how your products are treated, and you can manage shelf life. You can manage, expiration risk, right? You can understand the dwell time of your product, both at your facilities and at your partners' facilities, to make your supply chains more efficient and more resilient. And you can identify risk and share certificates to validate that someone's certified as Rainforest Alliance compliant, right? Or any kind of certificates that need to flow through the supply chain with this data. So even beyond the two use cases, right, supply chain efficiency is a broad category that is a big driver for some companies. So with end-to-end traceability, we've seen use cases across all these products. We've even seen large drive in non-food categories as well. So we've seen it with textiles as a major driver in Europe with a lot of the new sustainability regulations, and especially regulations like the EU Deforestation Act and regulations like the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, right? These ethical labor standards that require product traceability are getting into the same space where we've been that requires product level traceability. And that's been an interesting journey where some laws are now starting to mandate this end-to-end traceability, which is going to have a big impact on how companies handle this.
Well, and the FDA's Food Safety Modernization Act Rule 204 is a classic example of that. And I want to talk about that and iFoodDS. But before we get there, I want to understand a bit more about the plumbing. Can you explain a bit about how EPCIS is used by your platform? We've had folks from GS1 on, and even the chair of the group that defined EPCIS. So we've kind of gone into the detail of it in the abstract, but I'm really interested to understand how you're using it today, and if if there are going to be any changes, how you might use it in the future.
Yeah, GS1 and EPCIS is a crucial component of IBM Food Trust. From the beginning, I think IBM made a really smart decision to not assume that we know how to handle traceability better than the food industry. And I think that's a really important thing. Some companies come in and kind of assume that they can build their own standard. They can do it better than people that have been doing this for hundreds of years, right? Not hundreds, but the industry that's learned and grown and I'm not saying they're 100-year-old operators doing traceability.
No, but the food industry has been going for the farming tens of thousands of years, organized agricultural. So I get your point.
Yeah. So the GS1 standard is phenomenal. We've loved using it because it's not only provided us a framework to capture the necessary data for traceability, but also provided a framework for interoperability with other solution providers. Now, just to start, EPCIS, for those that maybe are less familiar or missed the other podcasts, it's a standard that enables the sharing of event data about the movement of and status of products within the supply chain. By incorporating EPCIS into IBM Food Trust, we can capture information about various points of the supply chain, such as the movement of a product from one location to another, the combination of ingredients, just like the transformation events I was mentioning, many to one to many. And EPCIS provides that underlying language that allows us to standardize the data and communicate not only with other companies, but within our own framework, right, about how data should be shared. So interoperability is another key area that the GS1 standard facilitates that I really think is very important. So early on in the journey, we had a lot of support from major companies. We had a lot of momentum, but very quickly we learned it's a very difficult thing to capture this data. In many cases, it's not enough to just provide the technology and expect these companies. Many cases, these food safety teams are very, very lean, very small teams that operate and have the responsibility of the management of huge levels of risk for their companies. And so adding food traceability to their plates and adding additional data capture to all of their teams across the entire supply chain is a huge, huge lift. In many cases, they need help. They need guidance. They need someone to come in and hold their hands, right? And maybe it's holding their hands, maybe it's doing some of the work for them, but we were not able to provide enough support to the industry. We provided enough support for many different categories, but it's so much support that realistically, I think the entire industry's technology providers all need to work together to provide the capacity to help companies do what's needed to become compliant with FSMA, right? And I bring this back to the Food Safety Modernization Act, Rule 204. It's going to go into effect in January of 2026. We're about 1/3 of the way there to compliance. No company is 1/3 of the way to being compliant, but we're going to see an absolutely exponential curve of companies that come up on that deadline and want to get it done as soon as possible. And the industry technology providers are just going to run out of capacity. So our thinking, and my thinking specifically, has been that this will not be in any scenario a one-winner-take-all market. As much as we'd like everyone to be on IBM Food Trust and participating, we do need a way to work with other technology providers to share data and share it in a trusted way. Bringing this all the way back to GS1, GS1 lays the standard to share data in that standardized format. So we do have the means to do that data sharing. We have run pilots on data sharing. We know that it works. And with the new FSMA requirements, right, their strict data standard, that is fully compliant with the GS1 standard, right? So we know that we have a model that works. We're adding a few data attributes to that model. And I think we're really well positioned to partner with other people in the industry to make these companies successful.
Well, yeah, I think you're masterfully drawing us to the next topic of our discussion, which is iFoodDS. So you just announced that partnership. To be frank, I was very surprised. I thought that you guys did everything, didn't need anyone. Why are you partnering with this other company, and who are they?
Yeah, not to harp on the message of togetherness and collaboration too much, but another quick anecdote. we were attending the North American Food Safety and Quality Conference in Chicago recently, and one of the themes that just kept coming up over and over and over again, which I loved, was that as an industry, we are better when we work together. There's no questioning this, and there is some conventional concepts of competition and especially in the data, the solution provider space, right? We have companies that are doing very similar things to what we're doing. I think globally there are maybe 200 different traceability solution providers that IBM Food Trust technically competes with. But I would really like to shift the narrative to working together. And I think that's the only way that we're all going to be successful. Now, iFoodDS is an exceptional company. I love everything about them. And we started talking with them about 8 months ago about a potential partnership with no real knowledge of what that would turn into, right? A lot of these conversations start as just meeting these people. We met up in New York and got to know each other and started having the conversation. And as things developed, it became very clear to me that iFoodDS was going to be a power in this industry, right? And a staying force. Some of the reasons I had this belief, very easy to explain. They hired Andrew Kennedy, right, who is a very well-known player in the industry. He is one of the key contributors and writers of the actual FSMA Rule 204D. Having him on their team was a huge, huge step for them. And when it comes to providing the services and the expertise to help companies get compliant with the rule, there's nothing better than having the guy that wrote the rule, right? I think that's pretty simply said.
Yeah.
Now, we also had another key player come full circle for us. So at the start of when IBM Food Trust launched, we were actually working very closely with Frank Yanis when he was at Walmart to build this initiative together. And he was one of the ones that actually helped drive, the mandate to the growers, drive this mission. He has been on this mission, I think, for a large part of his life to facilitate improved food safety through the concept of traceability. And he's done incredible things. After Walmart, he moved on to the FDA, where he was a deputy commissioner for a number of years, where he, again, had huge impact, but continued to drive this initiative and was able to push through the finalization of this rule. So he joined the iFoodDS board recently, and I had the pleasure of spending a couple of days with him at the iFoodDS company meeting recently. And what an incredible guy, what an incredible story that he has. And he continues to be a major force in the industry, providing guidance and help to companies that are interested in becoming compliant, right, and working on this compliance journey.
And at the risk of self-promotion, which is a risk I'm always willing to take, then Frank has been on this show. So a couple of weeks ago, then people can check out the episode with Frank. And I fully agree with all the positive things you've said about him. I have the privilege to work with him, as he's also full disclosure and a strategic advisor for Wiliot, which I think is part of how I got the chance to meet you. But anyway, back to your and IBM's decision on why to work with iFoodDS. It's pretty clear they've got amazing expertise between Frank and Andrew. Then you've got the architect and the builder, if you like, of the rule. What about the product fit? The fit between their product and your product?
Hey, it's a great question. And the product fit could not have been better, right? When we think about our individual strengths, iFoodDS is a company that has had a great deal of success in the food quality, traceability, and insights and analytics space. They have strong technology capabilities, deep industry expertise, well beyond Andy and Frank, right? It's really a very strong team, trusted by major brands like Ahold, US Foods, Del Monte, Aldi, just to name a few. And with that track record, right, complementing their expertise and depth of knowledge with IBM's technology seemed to be a very natural play. Now, based on that initial theory, right, it turned into so much more. And it's actually the case that they addressed one of the biggest challenges that I was alluding to in this food traceability space, which is collecting the data onboarding and data capture. Now, there's no one size fits all of data capture. everyone needs a different set of requirements. Everyone has different needs of what type of data they need to capture, when they need to capture the data, how they want to capture the data. It could be on their phones. It could be printing labels to put on cases, right? We discovered that the iFoodDS team has a very strong suite of technology to allow for data capture, and specifically FSMA compliant data capture for many different specific personas of the supply chain. So that complemented the basic data capture that we had. We had web forms, we had spreadsheets, APIs, but that complementary functionality expanded the suite of data capture well beyond what we had in the past. So what we are resulting with, and what we're calling the iFoodDS Trace Exchange solution with IBM Food Trust, is a solution that has expansive data capture capabilities, an incredibly strong backend backed by blockchain in a scalable way that already hosts data for many of the world's largest enterprises today. So we have enterprise-grade scalability, and not to mention, the amount of due diligence that IBM does on the trust and security front is really unparalleled. It's an enterprise company with strong practices around making sure data is secure and safe. And then the expertise to actually go implement and help companies out with the services branch of iFoodDS brought us all together in a really powerful way. So we're really excited. I really do think it's a significant step forward for the industry. I think iFoodDS will be a lasting player and a major player in the way that companies look at food traceability and food safety moving forward.
And so if I'm a grocer or a quick service restaurant and I buy this solution, do I contract with both of you, or am I contracting with iFoodDS and I just get the IBM as an embedded solution?
Yeah, so we're having iFoodDS lead with the contracting and lead with kind of the approach, right? And that's a little bit of a result of the strength that they have with not only their knowledgeable sellers and their kind of assistants. They've got project managers. They've really got a comprehensive team there that can provide everything. But it is important to acknowledge that the IBM Food Trust offering, right? We do have existing clients that are existing customers of Food Trust that may not need these additional services. They may already have integrations. They may already be part of the network. They also will be a part of this global network. So anyone that joins from any avenue, whether it be direct through IBM, whether it be through iFoodDS, will have access to be able to share their data seamlessly with anyone else on the network. So as the network grows, the economies of scale really grow very quickly. And we're talking about one supplier that could feed data to 20 retailers instantaneously, or one retailer that can interact with 10,000 of their suppliers, not only tier 1, but also tier 2, 3, 4, all the way up to provenance or the origin of the product. So as the network grows, right, it doesn't really matter who brings the customers in, but and the underlying structure of this network will continue to grow and provide such a service for the industry.
And with this integrated solution, am I going to be seeing dashboards from both companies? When would I use one versus the other, if that's the case?
Yeah. So we've actually divvied it up based on personas. So and this is all subject to change. We're going to keep meeting the needs of our different users, but the way we balance out the different personas is we have some people that are ingesting data, right? The data capture people, and this could be someone, as I've mentioned, on the farm. It could be someone in the manufacturing plant. It could be any operational user that is submitting data to be recorded. Now, that's typically going to be done through the iFoodDS applications, because they have this suite of tools that help you capture all the data necessary, bring it all together, and submit it to IBM Food Trust and capture it in a FSMA compliant way. Now, on the back end, we have a massive set of tools for analytics, for dashboards, for custom ways to view and analyze the data. It's very important that you're making sure that the data that gets in is good, right? So we can run evaluations on the data to say, of the data you're receiving from these partners, of the data you've uploaded, these items are not good, right? You're missing fields. You're not sharing data properly, right? There are a whole host of data issues that could come up. So we've actually built within what's called the IBM Supply Chain Intelligence Suite a host of applications that allow you to analyze the data, understand where your inventory is, understand where data quality issues may exist, and then instantaneously pull the reports that the FDA needs. So as a very key part of that, you can come in and very quickly just say, I need a report on this product in this time frame and provide the FDA exactly what they need in a matter of minutes. When I think about what we've done with Food Trust and the future that we have, I think it's really bright. And I think with the FDA's mandate, not only will we see huge progress for this industry in the US, but also around the world. We've seen other countries and other government organizations adopting these policies, not only to drive food safety for their populaces, but also to drive a reduction in food waste, sustainability initiatives. And this combination of sustainability in all of its facets, environmental, social, and governance, bringing that aspect into the solution paints a really beautiful picture of how we can use this to reduce food waste, feed more people in the world, provide more nutrition, reduce impact to our healthcare system, and really paint a better future in the food space. So I think we're just getting started on many of these fronts. And when we take traceability data and we think about what we can layer on top, like carbon footprint of the foods that we're harvesting, like sustainable practices, like certificates, documents, audits, all of the things that we can do get me personally very excited about how much more potential there is in this space. So I think the next few years are going to be really defining of what this industry becomes. I'll leave it at that.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that I noticed is IBM's, one of your more recent marketing campaigns, let's create something that changes everything. And I really think that this is an example of something that could change everything, the ability to join everything up and giving people information about what they're eating and providing regulators with what they need to keep us safe. That's important work. So full disclosure, I used to work at IBM, and I think once you've worked at IBM, it stays with you for the rest of your life. And I remember this was like back in 2000, 2001, the dot-com boom was just booming, and IBM bought this computer manufacturer that I worked for. It's like 3,000 people merged into a company that was over 300,000 people. And I went into it, and this was at the end of a century that basically saw IBM completely dominate the computing landscape, the mainframe. They were just a force, an unparalleled force in computing. They pioneered the IBM PC. The world's business was run on IBM mainframes, and they just kind of split into hardware, software, and services, but they were essentially still a massive hardware company. So I looked upon working at IBM as being a privilege and an education, really, being on the inside of this giant with immense power and an incredible legacy of innovation and so forth. So I asked Bard, what's changed at IBM since 2000, and it basically described, said it's got a bit smaller, but it's still like best part of 300,000 people. That's a lot of people. But the shift onto software. When you, one of the beauties of working at IBM, which is something I'd never experienced, was everyone knows IBM. So you didn't really have to explain who IBM was. But can you kind of describe IBM's business? If you're meeting someone who's just landed from another planet at a cocktail party, how do you describe IBM today if people want to know about IBM's business?
Yeah, the history is really important, and it's been interesting to, even as someone that's only been with the company, a little over 5 years, and I've had a wonderful run. I really share your thinking that it is a privilege and an honor to work at such a large and historied company. A lot of the history that I've learned and read up on of all the things that I've read, the book Who Says Elephants Can't Dance by Lou Gershner is a really, really wonderful piece of history on a time when IBM was facing a very difficult decision, when many companies at the time were splitting up and dividing into many different pieces. He was faced with a decision of whether to keep IBM whole or to divide it into its separate parts. And there are some wonderful anecdotes in the book, but long story short, at the time, Lou made the decision to keep IBM whole. And in that decision, he invested in ramping up our consulting and our software divisions to provide a complementary set of skills. Essentially, we provide the technology and we provide the means to implement it. Now, consulting is fully agnostic, right? And even to a fault, it's difficult as a software builder to have my own consulting teams going and selling our competitors, but that's really what they should do, right? And that's true to the consulting practice. You give clients what they need, but we still have a big mainframe business, but it's been neat to see over the years how quickly the software businesses have grown, and the span of the software that we cover is pretty far and wide, right? We have a strong, data and AI practice. We've got Watson in the portfolio, and Watson has continued to grow since big market moment with Watson on Jeopardy, right? With Ken Jennings, and seeing that in action a long time ago. A lot of people say, okay, Watson, I know it does Jeopardy, but I don't know what else it does. It's grown so much since then, and having the proliferation of ChatGPT, all these new technologies coming to the market. It's been neat to see Watson having another moment again, and it hasn't stopped growing. It hasn't stopped developing, right? It's still there, and it's still providing enterprise-grade AI solutions, machine learning solutions to companies. So within software, we've got data and AI. We've got supply chain, which is my focus, and really quite a bit of depth in supply chain from companies that we've acquired, some that are homegrown, and my portfolio is a mix of those two, and many other products and technologies, including asset management, right? We've got Maximo, Tririga. These are companies in some cases IBM acquired, and similar to your experience, invested in to combine or nurture or grow. And in many cases, they stand as staples of their industries, right? When it comes to asset management, everyone knows Maximo, right? And everyone uses it, right? It runs the asset management for major airports around the world and major facilities that people don't know under the surface what goes into maintaining these facilities, but it's really impressive technology.
Well, it's a remarkable story. Let's talk a bit about your story and how it culminated at IBM. I'm always fascinated to see what people studied at college. Obviously, college isn't the only way to start your career, but it seems like you was it economics and political science, and then you went to Duke and did an MBA. What is Duke like? I grew up in the UK, and so I went to the London Business School for what was not really an MBA. It was like just 1 month of very intensive study with a bunch of people from all around the world, learning about accounting and supply chains and so forth. But what is Duke like as someone who didn't grow up in the US? I'm fascinated by that brand and that environment.
Yeah, I think I'm lucky to have had experiences at so many different places that have rich histories, and Duke is definitely a place with a rich history, right? From the moment you walk onto the campus and you see the cathedral, right? The beautiful history, architecture, everything down to the library. And weird to get excited about a library, but I loved their library. They were just beautifully designed. You get excited to go in and study, and it was a wonderful experience. Yeah, I was at the Fuqua School of Business, and it opened up my eyes in a really exciting way. So in my undergrad, I was at a liberal arts school and studied economics, political science, and ultimately really felt that translated well to finance. And I was very fixated on the financial world. I wanted to get into finance, but very quickly in the financial world, I realized that technology was revolutionizing everything that we were doing. So from an early start at the New York Stock Exchange, I kind of was focused on data, on technology, and then worked for another firm called Pico Quantitative Trading that facilitated trading infrastructure. All of this to say, this was a neat path where I started realizing more and more the value of technology, my own passion for building and creating products and experiences that really had an impact on not only my clients, but, the world, right? And trying to drive a positive impact. So when I got to Duke, I didn't really know what the path was going to be, but it was incredible how much it opened my eyes to what's out there, right? How many different career paths there are. And everyone talks about, I'm not sure what I want to do with my life. I'm still not sure, right? I don't think anyone really is. And I think it's healthy to keep an open mind, right? You can always change your path and do something new. But it was really exciting to discover for the first time that this kind of career path in product management where I could build and be the CEO of my own product. And I really kind of learned about that there. Duke as a school has incredible teachers. I took a class that I'll never forget with Cam Harvey that was all about crypto and crypto implementation, not cryptocurrency necessarily, but all of the things happening with blockchain and the technology and different ways to implement it. And in that class, we wrote our own smart contracts on Ethereum. We actually implemented things. And Cam is known very well as a leader in kind of the crypto space and has spoken publicly on many, many different occasions. But having exposure to him, having exposure to that class, and in that class, ironically, we had someone come and speak to us about IBM Food Trust, this new IBM product that had been created with a vision to address food traceability in throughout the world. And I kind of stuck with me, and that was less than a year before I graduated, a few months before I graduated. I just couldn't stop thinking about how cool of a use of that new technology and just how exciting it was. It really sunk in, and so I couldn't get it out of my mind. And it's been a neat journey to ultimately come to own the product that I was so impressed by at the time.
Well, I really think your job is a tough one. I mean, on one hand, you've got the power of a massive company with some awesome customers, but product management, I think, is one of the hardest jobs in the world. And it's one of these things where it's kind of easy to get along and do it badly, but to do it well is so difficult. And it requires that 360-degree Renaissance person type capability. You got to understand technology and the business and it's sequencing, and it requires so many skills. So for someone with your talents, I'm sure it's a lot of fun. I got to get to the hardest questions of the interview, which are your 3 favorite songs and why. So what did you choose?
I love this question. I'm just so happy about thinking about that because I love music. I've always been kind of music focused, and for me, music is highly nostalgic, right? It in some cases transports me back to a certain place and time, and so I started thinking about songs that have actually had an impact that bring me back. One is a very lesser known song by the Beatles. And the story is when I was in elementary school, I was in a band. We had a small cover band. We had a drummer, a bass player, a piano player, and I was guitar and singing. And we even had some guests coming in playing the saxophone and singing for us. It was a really fun band. We performed at our middle school dance once, and that was probably the peak of my elementary school life. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. But there was a moment when we were practicing, and my mom gave us as a gift the full charts and the full scores of all of the Beatles songs ever published, and it was this thick book. You open it up and you get all the different instruments, all the different parts. But as a result of that, we did mostly Beatles cover music, and so one of the songs that I remember was really difficult to play, but really just sounded so good when we played it together was "And Your Bird Can Sing" by the Beatles. And it's got this great guitar riff coming in, and I don't know how many people know it. I think it's a little bit of a fringe song, but it brings me back to sitting in that band room in elementary school with our friends and just playing together. So that's my first.
Wonderful choice. I'm intensely jealous, but what a great story. Fantastic. Yeah. And you were going to say, what's your second?
The second is an interesting one. No one's going to figure out what my taste in music is because this is a combination of two music tastes that really don't go together. I'm a real lover of Andrea Bocelli and his singing. And specifically, I've never been an opera fan. I don't think I could sit and watch a 3-hour-long opera and be thrilled about it. But he takes opera and combines it with pop music. And there's a song he did, a collaboration with Ed Sheeran, that's called Perfect Symphony. And so as a gift, because my wife knows that I love, Andrea Bocelli, she took me to the concert a couple of years ago in Madison Square Garden, and it was one of the greatest concerts. You've got Andrea up on stage bringing, his family together. He's got his son, he's got his daughter, he's got, singers from all different events. He's got a cellist that was, playing drums on the cello. It was just a great, great memory and a really special one. So a combination of opera and Ed Sheeran, and it comes together in a really, really nice way. So that's number 2.
Awesome. I've always wanted to go to Madison Square Gardens. Never did it. I did go and see U2 at the Sphere the other day, though, and that was just absolutely mind-blowingly amazing.
I'm sure. The Sphere in Las Vegas?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It was, I mean, it cost an arm and a leg, but I'd find another arm and another leg and go again to just experience it. I want to see the movies and that sort of thing. Anyway, but, that's new and doesn't have the amazing history of Madison Square Garden, which has just seen so many of rock's historic concerts. I think that was where John Lennon did his last performance. Elton John asked him on stage. I'm just listening to Bernie Taupin's memoir at the moment, and he describes that. Anyway, there's been a lot of amazing concerts there. You are hitting it out of the park. What's the third one?
The third and most important, which is more for me than for anyone, is another lesser known artist, but it's the song that I chose for my first dance at my wedding. And it's this artist named Ben Rector, and the song is Forever Like That. It's a little cheesy. It hits all the points. We want to be, very lovey-dovey and probably groan worthy for some people. But this one was solidified in my memory, not just because of our first dance, but my Ben Rector. He's a pretty popular artist, but he's still kind of up and coming. And so we managed to go to one of his concerts a few years ago in New York, and it was on a pier that had just recently been completed, and we were on the roof of this pier down in the financial district of New York. You can see the Brooklyn Bridge, beautiful views of the water, and we didn't know what he was going to play, but he ended up playing our favorite song. He played all of his hits, and we were so happy afterwards. We went to grab a drink at a bar nearby, and we ended up seeing his drummer, Scooter. So, I had to say hi to Scooter on the street. And so I walked up and I said, Scooter, you don't know me, but you were amazing. What a performance. And then all of a sudden, Ben, the man himself, walked up right behind us. And it's a moment where you realize, these artists are just people like us. They're just good people, and they're on an incredible journey. And they brought such joy to so many people's lives. That was just such a great moment. And they all ended up climbing into the Uber that my wife and I had ordered to go home. And so we said, you guys can come with us if you want, but we're not going where you're expecting you're going. So had a whole snafu with them, and it was great. It was just a really special moment. So that's a good core memory.
Yeah, those are great choices. Wonderful. Well, Wiggs, it's been a delight to have you on the show. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Mr. Beacon Ambient IoT podcast here on YouTube. You can listen to this episode on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed it, please like and share this video. And be sure to subscribe for more videos. For more information about Wiliot, Ambient IoT, and IoT Pixels, head over to wiliot.com.